attend the University of Notre Dame this fall. Zack.
Hey everyone. As we reach ever closer to the end of our career as high school students and approach that awkward milestone border between adolescence and adulthood, I'd like to begin with a somewhat appropriate quote from one of my favorite authors, John Reed. When adults say teenagers think they're invincible with that sly, stupid smile on their faces, they don't know how right they are. We need never be hopeless because we can never be irreparably broken. We think that we are invincible because we are. We cannot be born and we cannot die. Like all energy, we can only change shapes and sizes and manifestations. They forget that when they get old. They get scared of losing and failing. But that part of us, greater than the sum of all our parts, cannot begin and cannot end, and so it cannot fail. As a senior at Walsh Jesuit, you come to the realization that the shape of all your parts, as well as the various experiences you've undertaken these 4 years, has molded you into the individual you are standing today. They include finally earning that coveted front spot in the student section at every sports event, decking the halls in permanent gold during the senior lock-in, and finally getting the chance to ask your crush to prom, and of course taking English class taught by none other than Mr. Lee. One of the beginning skills we learned in Mr. Lee's class is how to structure our introductions and our essays with a strong AGD and attention-getting device. What entails a strong AGD, as I've learned in Mr. Lee's class, is to avoid using quotes as your opening strategy. But seeing as I've already failed to do that, I might as well just try to salvage what's left and move on. So I stand up here in front of all of you, my best friends in the whole world, who I hold and deem with respect and love, and thus try to avoid making a fool of myself, causing you all to change your minds. It's stuff I understand, but hearing your response again isn't what's propelling me forward. In the words of St. Francis Xavier, it is not the actual physical exertion that counts towards a man's progress, nor the nature of the task, but the spirit of faith which it is undertaken. Indeed, the spirit of faith is what powers those toils that Walsh Jesuit provided us to become men and women for others, to employ the teaching of St. Ignatius of Loyola to not only our academics, but to all factors of our lives. But exactly what is the spirit of faith, and how does it relate in any way, shape, or form to the 4 years we spent at Walsh Jesuit? In August of 2011, some 275 of us entered the halls which we soon hope to conquer. Like our teeth held by our prepubescent braces, we managed to settle into the ups and downs that dot the Walsh Jesuit educational landscape, made friends, made enemies, and ultimately found a place we can at least think of as home. I myself took the initiative to become active in school, finding non-successes on the JV Academic Challenge team with my teammates Nicole Davison and Adam Hall, who've been right there by my side every match since, and each challenge made me feel better for myself. My active school life led on to being late the entire first week of Mr. Rich's honors freshman algebra class. So of course taking part in a haphazard picnic of our 3 days Boulevard broken dream for that year's college show, which probably still resides in the embarrassing depths of YouTube, much to Mr. Gods' joy. But ironically, although my dreams of musical greatness might have been as broken as the strings on my guitar that night, I still kept learning. In the spirit of faith of constantly bettering oneself, learning isn't as much about achieving results, but the path in which one undertakes to reach those results. It took us 4 years after all, from breaking glass windows in Mr. LaGuardia's room to breaking glass ceilings with Walsh's very own gender equality club, a product of the class of 2015's Betsy Anderson, Lexi Bryan, and Sam Morgan. Through this notion, I learned the essence of what being a good leader meant, to understand the ramifications of friendship, how to further develop myself to achieve higher, all through the simple principle of being open and true. So you must probably understand by now that I'm going to be referring to grads throughout this speech, because in reality, they actually do provide a perfect set guide on how Walsh Jesuit molds us into the individuals of tomorrow. The spirit of faith begins with being open to growth and extends to an educational standard. In exploring what it means to be intellectually competent, the school's website writes that the student will develop many intellectual skills and understandings that cut across and go beyond academic requirements of college entrance. True, we gain the analytical mind to solve practical problems, and the creative aspect to explore how these solutions can adapt to meet people's needs. But to me, being intellectually competent means being wrong. It entails raising your hand up to provide what you believe to be the solution and to be shot right down. We're an ever-transient class, susceptible to the change of time, but willing to develop as a result. Who would have thought that students would rock right out of school some 20 years after opposition rose to the addition of female students? This time opposition rose to the absence of just one. The point lies in the Walsh students who are willing to stand up for their beliefs and consequently their failures as well. Even if the end result leaves no fruition, the spirit of faith propels us through that journey. It means accepting your downfall and striving for harder, which brings us to the next principle. So in what ways do we as students become religious? For one thing, most of us have taken the call to actively exercise our faith as Eucharistic ministers, retreat leaders, and most importantly, as students at a Jesuit high school who reflect on a daily exam. Being religious means embracing that spirit of faith, as the graduate will also examine his or her own religious feelings and beliefs, with a view to choosing a fundamental orientation toward God and establishing a relationship with a religious tradition and or community. Indeed, we explore our faith with constantly learning, from interreligious dialogue to the foundations of discernment. After all, we as seniors are the ones who lead the daily exam and explore how our faith has changed throughout the years. But truth be told, my relationship with God is far from perfect. But this is where we move to the next line, to be loving. Around the beginning of my senior year, I became ever more observant of the development of my sister Mandy. For those of you who don't know, Mandy is autistic. She never has or will have the chance to attend a school like Walsh or attend a regular college due to this debilitating disorder, which has caused all our lives to adjust around her. I like to say I'm the perfect mother, but of course I couldn't be farther from it. We argue and fight just like every other pair of siblings, but in the end, the confines of normalcy somewhat end there. You don't know the meaning of stress and hopelessness until you watch your sister, who you absolutely love, grow up and slowly come to the conclusion that she never is nor will be considered normal. At that time, I felt empty inside. My only escape was to ignore that misery and simply make people laugh. So I got myself on Twitter, slowly adapted to who I was as a person, the rest is what you see here. To me, all my friends have fallen just a facet of my existence. I didn't know what it meant to truly love someone for who they are. That all changed for me, of course, with the 4 days I spent as a retreat when I came 100. Let me tell you something. There's no better feeling in the world than realizing that you are indeed out of God's help. I realized something that fateful day, that Mandy and I were meant to love each other as siblings, that we nurtured and supported, as Mr. March always says, one another despite our flaws. The words famously said in Les Miserables, to love another person is to see the face of God. I truly do attempt to see God in everything, as St. Ignatius would have liked it for me. Whether it's in the stories we try to get Doc off topic with, to the faces of every single one of you here in this room, I find God present in all of you. I find God present within Alexandra Elizabeth and her fellow members of Walsh's Own Pudding Club, which established a tradition of nurturing friendships among children with special needs. I find God present in our football players, who before bringing the bell back from St. B, begin each of their games with prayer. I would say I find the Holy Spirit present in Ben Thompson's hair in the form of a ton of fire. But in all reality, I can only count the energy and charisma he brings to the diagram class. As he himself puts it, we enter Walsh as strangers, but we leave as family. I find God ever present in Miss G, whose nightmares of me beginning to use topic sentences and ending. Or similarly in Coach G, who I've never had in class, but treats me and everyone else with the love and respect as individuals that's hard to come by outside of Walsh. I find God present in Joey Rowland, whose spirit of faith powers him for a state championship as a swimmer, but also as an invaluable friend of us all. I see God present in Alice Lasky, who brings her talents to the girls' soccer team to help them achieve their third back-to-back state championship, while still managing to inspire us all with the relationship she shares with her brother Ryan. I see God in my good friend and Swampert leader, Don Whitaker, who, when he's not leading the student section of the football games in our chance, is always there to open up and make everyone feel welcome as part of the WJ family. The list could go on and on. For time's sake, I'll move on to our last point, the value of being committed to doing justice. Indeed, we are imperfect creatures with imperfect souls, guided by the misery of our lack of understanding and the ignorance of our follies. Boy, does Walsh Treasury do a wonderful job of trying to change that. Walsh students have experienced the essence of humanity on Barbara, understanding that solidarity defines us all into one human family, each deserving of respect. Students have taken their services abroad to Iran, Ecuador, stayed in their own lane at Barclay, but most importantly, students have taken their service right back to Walsh Treasury, always ready to help out a fellow friend in need and ready to be there at any cost. I cannot stress how thankful I am to be part of this school, to actively play a role in the school's half-century of academic excellence. This year, we'll send 25 athletes to continue their academic and athletic careers, but furthermore, take the knowledge they learn on the fields and in the classrooms to actualize that spirit of faith Walsh has been nurturing these past years. Countless others will reach the top of great institutions from the Ivy League, the shores of Scotland at St. Andrews, right back here in our levels to go on. All in all, the class of 2015 is a group that knows the foundations of justice are the cornerstones of a strong individual. To become, in the words of Father Pedro Rube, men and women founders. This year, our school motto was to do Images, to seek that spiritual, academic, and overall more in our lives. Well, Images is really right there for us. It's time to turn a fresh new page in the notebook of our lives and start writing a new. The spirit of faith which powers us is leading us to take those radical paths in the heart and dive into the evil one though. But don't worry about the labels and sort of next. After all, it is and always will be a great day to be aware. Thank you.